1942, a prison cell on Jersey Island. Cold stone walls. The smell of damp concrete and rust. A man sat alone in the darkness, his back against the wall, staring at the barred window above. His name was Eddie Chapman, thief, safecracker, con artist. And soon, the most dangerous double agent of World War II. But nobody knew that yet. The German soldiers who guarded him didn't know. The British authorities who locked him up didn't know. Even Eddie himself didn't fully understand what he was about to become. All he knew was this: he had to get out. And he would do whatever it took, anything. The cell door opened. A German officer stepped inside, polished boots clicking against the stone floor. Eddie looked up. The officer's face was hard, expressionless. "You asked to speak with us," he said in accented English. Eddie stood slowly. His legs were stiff from weeks of sitting. "I did. Why?" Eddie smiled. It was a gambler's smile. Confident, dangerous. "Because I want to make you an offer." The officer raised an eyebrow. "An offer? You're a prisoner. You have nothing to offer." "Wrong." Eddie stepped closer, close enough to see the officer's eyes narrow with suspicion. "I have something you need. Information, skills, loyalty." "Loyalty?" The officer almost laughed. "You're British. I'm not British." Eddie's voice dropped lower, harder. "I'm a criminal. The British locked me in here. They threw away the key. You think I owe them anything?" Silence. The officer studied him. Searching for the lie. Searching for the trap. But Eddie's face showed nothing. Just cold, calculated hatred. Whether it was real or not didn't matter. What mattered was that the German believed it. And he did. "What are you proposing?" The officer asked slowly. Eddie leaned in. "Train me. Send me back to England. I'll sabotage their factories. Blow up their planes. Feed you intelligence. Whatever you need." The officer stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the door. "We'll see." That was all he said. But it was enough. 3 days later, Eddie Chapman was on a boat to France. The prison cell was behind him. Freedom was ahead. Or so he thought. What he didn't know was that the game had just begun, and the stakes were higher than he could ever imagine. Eddie had always been good at games. Cards, dice, women. He knew how to read people, how to find their weaknesses, how to make them trust him even when they shouldn't. It was a gift. Or a curse, depending on how you looked at it. He grew up poor in the northeast of England, Sunderland, a city of coal and smoke and broken dreams. His father was a ship engineer who drank too much. His mother died when he was young. Eddie learned early that if you wanted something in this world, you had to take it. Nobody was going to give it to you, so he took money from pockets, watches from wrists, safes from jewelry stores. By the time he was 20, he was one of the best safecrackers in England. Fast hands, steady nerves, no fear, but every gambler loses eventually. In 1939, the police caught up with him. They arrested him in Scotland Yard's lobby, of all places. Eddie had walked in with a forged check, trying to cash it right under their noses. Bold, stupid, both. They threw him in prison. Then the war started. German forces invaded the Channel Islands. Jersey fell, and suddenly Eddie's British prison became a German prison. That's when he got the idea. If I can't break out, maybe I can talk my way out. And that's exactly what he did. The training camp was in Nantes, France. An old villa surrounded by trees hidden from the main road. Eddie arrived on a cold November morning in 1942. 2 German officers met him at the gate. Neither smiled. "Follow us," one said. They led him inside. The villa was elegant once. High ceilings, marble floors. Now it was stripped bare, converted into a training facility for spies and saboteurs. Maps covered the walls. Tables were stacked with explosives, detonators, fake documents. Eddie felt a thrill run through him. "This is it. This is real." A man was waiting in the main room. Tall, thin, sharp blue eyes behind round glasses. He wore a German uniform but carried himself like a professor, not a soldier. "I am Oberleutnant von Groening," he said. His English was perfect. "I will be your handler." Eddie nodded. "Pleased to meet you." Von Groening didn't return the pleasantry. He walked to the table and picked up a small metal device. "Do you know what this is?" "No, it's a detonator. You'll learn how to use it. You'll also learn radio operation, parachute jumping, espionage techniques, and most importantly, How to survive in enemy territory. Von Groening set the device down and looked directly at Eddie. But before any of that, I need to know one thing. What? Why should we trust you? Eddie didn't hesitate. You shouldn't, Von Groening blinked. For the first time, surprise flickered across his face. Eddie continued. Trust is earned, not given. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to use me. Send me to England. Give me a target. I'll prove myself with results, not words. Silence filled the room. Then Von Groening smiled. It was a thin smile, barely visible. But it was there. Good answer. He gestured toward the door. Your training begins tomorrow. Don't disappoint us, Herr Chapman. Eddie didn't plan to. But he also didn't plan to work for them. He had a different game in mind. A game nobody saw coming. Not the Germans, not the British, not even the women he loved. Because Eddie Chapman wasn't just playing both sides, he was playing everyone. The training was brutal. Every morning, Eddie woke before dawn. Physical conditioning came first. Running through the forest, climbing walls, hand-to-hand combat. The German instructors were merciless. One mistake meant punishment. Push-ups until his arms shook. Laps around the villa until his lungs burned. But Eddie thrived on it. He'd spent years in prison doing nothing. Now his body came alive again. Strong, sharp, dangerous. After physical training came technical training, explosives. Eddie learned how to build bombs from common materials. Dynamite hidden in soap bars. Timers made from alarm clocks. Detonators disguised as cigarette lighters. The instructors showed him how to blow up factories, railways, power stations. Always aim for maximum damage with minimum exposure, Von Groening explained one afternoon. They stood in an empty field, staring at a wooden shed 50 meters away. Inside the shed was a practice bomb Eddie had built that morning. Are you ready? Von Groening asked. Eddie nodded. Von Groening handed him a small remote trigger. Press the button. Eddie pressed it. The explosion ripped through the shed like a fist through paper. Wood splinters flew into the air. Smoke billowed upward. The sound echoed across the field, rolling through the trees. Eddie felt his heart pound. Not from fear, from excitement. Power. Von Groening clapped him on the shoulder. Well done. Now imagine that's a British airplane factory, Eddie imagined it. But not the way Von Groening thought. In his mind, Eddie saw something else. A different plan, a different target. Because he'd already decided. He wasn't going to blow up anything for Germany. He was going to turn himself into the British the moment he landed. And then? Then the real game would begin. Radio operation was next. Every spy needed to communicate with headquarters. The Germans gave Eddie a compact radio transmitter, no bigger than a suitcase. It could send coded messages across hundreds of miles. You'll use this to report your progress, the instructor said. He was a young man, maybe 25, with nervous hands and a stutter. We'll give you coded phrases. Memorize them. If you forget even one word, the British might intercept and decode your messages. Eddie memorized everything. Code phrases, frequencies, call signs. He practiced for hours every night, tapping out messages in Morse code until his fingers moved automatically, without thinking. But even as he learned, he wondered, what will I tell them when I land? How do I convince the British I'm not a real German spy? The answer came during parachute training. They took Eddie to an airfield outside Nantes. A small plane waited on the runway, its propeller spinning slowly. A jump instructor stood nearby, holding a parachute pack. You'll jump from 1,000 meters, the instructor said. Pull the rip cord at 500. Aim for the field. Don't break your legs, Eddie grinned. That's it? No safety net? Safety net? The instructor laughed. You're jumping into England in 2 weeks. There won't be a safety net there either. Eddie strapped on the parachute. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. 2 weeks. That's all I have left. The plane took off. It climbed higher and higher, the ground shrinking below. Eddie sat near the open door, wind whipping his face. He looked down at France disappearing beneath him. Somewhere out there was England, home, or what used to be home. What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm really working for Germany? Then they'd shoot him. Or hang him. Either way, he'd be dead. But if they did believe him, if they believed him, he could become something more than a thief. More than a criminal. He could become a weapon, a ghost. A man who existed in 2 worlds at once, loyal to neither, controlled by both. A double agent. The instructor shouted over the roar of the engine. "Ready?" Eddie stood. He moved to the edge of the door. The wind screamed past him. The ground was so far below it looked like a painting. "Go!" the instructor yelled. Eddie jumped. For 3 seconds he fell through empty air. The wind tore at his clothes. His stomach flipped. Then he pulled the ripcord. The parachute opened with a violent jerk. Suddenly the world went silent. He floated down, swaying gently, the ground rising slowly to meet him. Eddie smiled. This is it. This is the moment everything changes. He landed hard, rolled, and stood up. His legs were shaky but intact. The instructor ran over, grinning. "Perfect landing. You're ready, Chapman." Eddie brushed the dirt off his jacket. "Yeah, I'm ready." But ready for what? The instructor didn't know. Nobody did. 2 days before the mission, von Groening called Eddie into his office. It was late. The villa was quiet. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. "Sit," von Groening said. Eddie sat. Von Groening poured 2 glasses of brandy and handed one to Eddie. "A toast," he said. "To success." They drank. The brandy burned Eddie's throat, but he didn't flinch. He'd drunk worse. Von Groening set his glass down and leaned back in his chair. "I want to tell you something, Chapman. Something you should know before you leave." "What's that?" "You remind me of someone." Von Groening's voice was quiet now, almost sad. "A friend I had before the war. He was like you, clever, fearless. He didn't care about politics or nations. He just wanted to live." Eddie said nothing. "He died in Poland," von Groening continued. "Shot by partisans. I found his body in a ditch." He paused. "War is ugly, Chapman. It turns men into monsters. But you're different. You're not a soldier. You're not a patriot. You're a survivor," Eddie met his eyes. "Is that a compliment?" Von Groening smiled faintly. "It's a warning. Survivors do whatever it takes to stay alive, even if it means betraying the people who trust them." Eddie's heart skipped a beat. Does he know? Does he suspect? But von Groening's expression didn't change. He simply raised his glass again. "Don't die in England, Chapman. I'd like to see you again after the war." Eddie raised his glass. "I'll do my best." They drank in silence, but Eddie knew the truth. He would never see von Groening again, not as a friend, not as an ally. Because when Eddie landed in England, he was going to betray everything the Germans believed about him. And then the real Eddie Chapman would emerge. The man who fooled everyone. The man who played both sides and walked away untouched. The man who became a legend. December 16th, 1942, the night of the mission. Eddie stood on the airfield, dressed in civilian clothes. Dark coat, black gloves, no identification. If the British caught him, the Germans wanted no connection. Just another spy. Just another dead man. The plane waited on the runway. A Junkers Ju 88, its engines humming softly. The pilot was already inside, checking instruments. Von Groening walked Eddie to the plane. "Your target is the de Havilland factory in Hatfield," he said. "It produces mosquito bombers. Blow it up. Then radio us with confirmation." Eddie nodded. "Understood." Von Groening handed him a small suitcase. Inside was the radio, explosives, money, and a fake identity card. "Everything you need." Eddie took it. The weight felt real in his hands. Final von Groening extended his hand. "Good luck, Chapman." Eddie shook it. "Thank you for everything." And he meant it, because von Groening had given him something he never expected, a way out. Eddie climbed into the plane. The door closed behind him. The engines roared to life. The plane taxied down the runway faster and faster, until the wheels left the ground and they were airborne. Eddie looked out the window. France disappeared into the darkness below. Ahead, somewhere in the black night, was England, home or hell. He didn't know which yet, but in a few hours he would find out. The plane flew over the English Channel. Eddie sat in silence, his mind racing. What will I say? How will I explain? The pilot shouted over the engine noise. 5 minutes. Eddie stood. He checked his parachute one last time. Everything was secure. 2 minutes. The side door opened. Cold wind rushed in, screaming. Eddie moved to the edge. Below him was darkness. Total darkness. No lights, no landmarks. Just black. This is it. "No turning back! Go!" Eddie jumped into the void. The wind grabbed him. The plane roared away above. Then the parachute opened, and suddenly everything went quiet. He floated down through the freezing December night. The ground was invisible below. He had no idea where he would land. A field, a forest, a lake. He didn't care, because Eddie Chapman wasn't afraid anymore. He was free, and the game had just begun. Eddie hit the ground hard. His knees buckled. He rolled sideways, the parachute collapsing around him like a giant silk shroud. For a moment he just lay there, staring up at the black sky, feeling the cold English earth beneath him. I made it. I'm alive. He sat up slowly, pain shooting through his ankle, twisted, not broken. He could walk. That's all that mattered. The parachute was a problem. White fabric spread across the field, visible even in the darkness. He had to hide it, fast. Eddie pulled out a knife from his boot and cut away the cords. Then he gathered the silk, bundled it tight, and shoved it under a hedge at the edge of the field. He checked his suitcase. Still intact. The radio inside was undamaged. Good. Now what? The original plan was simple. Land, hide, make contact with German headquarters, then sabotage the de Havilland factory. But Eddie had a different plan. A plan the Germans didn't know about. I'm going to turn myself in. The question was, where? He had no idea where he'd landed. Could be anywhere in England. He needed to find a road, a town, someone who could take him to the police. He started walking. The field was frozen, the ground crunching under his boots. His breath came out in white clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Eddie froze. Just a farm dog. Keep moving. After 20 minutes, he found a road, narrow, unpaved, hedges on both sides. He followed it south, or what he thought was south. Hard to tell in the dark. Then he saw lights. A small farmhouse sat at the end of a long driveway. Warm yellow light glowed in the windows. Smoke rose from the chimney. Eddie's heart pounded. This is it. First contact. He walked up to the door and knocked. Silence. He knocked again. Louder. Footsteps inside. The door opened a crack. An old man peered out, suspicious. What do you want? I need help, Eddie said. His voice was steady, calm. I've had an accident. My car broke down up the road. The old man squinted at him. At this hour? Yes, please. I just need to use your phone. The old man hesitated. Then he opened the door wider. Come in then, quick. Eddie stepped inside. The warmth hit him immediately. A fire crackled in the hearth. An old woman sat in a chair nearby, knitting. She looked up, startled. Who's this, Arthur? She asked. Says his car broke down, the old man replied. He gestured toward a telephone on the wall. There's the phone, Eddie walked over. He picked up the receiver, pretending to dial. But his mind was racing. Should I tell them now, or wait until I reach the police? Before he could decide, the old man spoke again. You're not from around here, are you? Eddie turned. No, I'm from London. Long way from London. The old man's eyes narrowed. What brings you out here in the middle of the night? Eddie forced a smile. Business trip. Got lost in the dark. The old man didn't look convinced. He glanced at Eddie's coat, his boots, the suitcase in his hand. That's an odd suitcase for a business trip. Eddie's pulse quickened. He's suspicious? I need to control this. He set the phone down. You're right. I'm not a businessman. He met the old man's eyes. I'm a German spy, and I want to turn myself in, the old woman gasped. The old man's face went pale. Don't move, Eddie said quickly. I'm not here to hurt you. I just need you to call the police. Tell them I'm here. Tell them I want to surrender. The old man stared at him. You're joking. I'm not. Silence. Then the old woman stood. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was firm. Arthur. Call the police now. The old man didn't argue. He picked up the phone and dialed. Eddie sat down on the couch. His ankle throbbed. His heart raced. But he felt strangely calm. It's done. No going back now. 10 minutes later, headlights appeared outside. Car doors slammed. Boots crunched on gravel. The door burst open. 4 men stormed in. Plainclothes, serious faces. One held a pistol aimed directly at Eddie's chest. Hands up, the man barked. Eddie raised his hands. I'm unarmed. They searched him anyway. Rough hands patted down his coat, his legs, his boots. They found the knife, the money, the fake identity card. Who are you? One of them demanded. My name is Eddie Chapman. I was sent here by German intelligence to sabotage the de Havilland factory. But I'm not going to do it. I want to work for you instead. The men exchanged glances. One of them spoke into a radio. We need transport. Now. They cuffed Eddie's hands behind his back and led him outside. A black car waited in the driveway. They shoved him into the back seat. Two men sat on either side of him. The car sped off into the night. Eddie stared out the window. Fields rushed past. Dark shapes of trees. He had no idea where they were taking him. But he knew one thing. His life would never be the same. They drove for hours. No one spoke. Eddie tried to ask questions, but the men ignored him. Finally, the car stopped. They were in London. Eddie recognized the street. They'd brought him to a nondescript building with no sign, no markings. Just a heavy wooden door. Inside, it was all business. Long hallways, closed doors, the smell of cigarettes and old paper. They led Eddie into a small room. A table, 2 chairs, a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Sit, one of the men said. Eddie sat. They left him alone. Eddie waited. 5 minutes, 10, 20. Then the door opened. A man walked in, mid-40s, gray suit, thin mustache, cold, intelligent eyes. He carried a file folder under his arm. He sat down across from Eddie. My name is Tar Robertson. I work for MI5. He opened the folder. And you, Mr. Chapman, are in a great deal of trouble. Eddie said nothing. Tar Robertson flipped through the papers. German training, explosives, sabotage mission, parachute drop. You realize that under British law you should be executed. Eddie met his gaze. I realize that. Then why did you turn yourself in? Because I want to work for you. Tar Robertson leaned back in his chair. Work for us, as what? A double agent? Yes. Why should we trust you? You shouldn't, Eddie said. It was the same answer he'd given von Groening. Trust is earned. Give me a mission. Let me prove myself. Tar Robertson studied him. Long silence. Then he closed the folder. Tell me everything. From the beginning, every detail, every person, every location. If you lie to me even once, this conversation is over. Eddie took a breath. I was born in Sunderland. He talked for 3 hours. He told them about the prison, the German offer, the training in France, von Groening, the explosives, the radio codes, everything. Tar Robertson didn't interrupt. He just listened, occasionally taking notes. When Eddie finished, Tar Robertson stood. Wait here. He left the room. Eddie waited again. This time for over an hour. When Tar Robertson returned, he wasn't alone. Another man was with him, older, distinguished, expensive suit. This is Colonel Robin Stevens, Tar Robertson said. Head of Camp ZO20. Eddie's blood went cold. He'd heard of Camp ZO20. It was where they interrogated captured spies. And most of them didn't leave alive. Colonel Stevens sat down. He didn't smile. Mr. Chapman, I've read your file. I've reviewed your statement. And I have one question for you. What's that? Are you loyal to Germany? Or are you loyal to Britain? Eddie looked him in the eye. Neither. I'm loyal to myself, Stevens blinked. Excuse me. I don't care about nations or flags or politics, Eddie said. I care about survival. The Germans wanted to use me. Fine. But I'm not stupid enough to actually blow up a factory and get myself killed. So I turned myself in. Now you want to use me. Also fine. As long as I'm alive at the end of this war, I don't care who wins. Silence. Then, surprisingly, Colonel Stevens smiled. It was a thin, humorless smile. But it was there. Honest answer. Brutal, but honest. He looked at Tar Robertson. What do you think? Tar Robertson nodded slowly. I think we can use him. Eddie felt relief flood through him. They believed me, but Colonel Stevens wasn't finished. Understand this, Chapman. If you betray us, we will kill you. Not quickly. Not mercifully. We will make you regret every lie you've ever told. Eddie nodded. I understand. Good. Stevens stood. Welcome to the double-cross system, Mr. Chapman. Your code name is Agent Zigzag. Agent Zigzag. Eddie liked the sound of that. They moved him to a safe house in North London. A small flat, guarded 24 hours a day. Eddie wasn't a prisoner exactly, but he wasn't free either. For the next 2 weeks, they trained him. Not German training, British training. How to send false information. How to lie convincingly over the radio. How to make the Germans believe he was still working for them. Your first message is critical, Tar Robertson explained. You need to report that you've successfully landed and are preparing for the sabotage mission. Make it believable. Make it detailed. Eddie nodded. I can do that. They gave him a radio. The same model the Germans had given him. Eddie set it up, tuned to the correct frequency, and began tapping out a message in Morse code. Landed safely. No injuries. Hiding in safe location. Factory surveillance. Begins tomorrow. Will report progress. Fritz was his German call sign. He sent the message and waited. 3 hours later, the reply came back. Excellent work, Fritz. Proceed as planned. Await further instructions. Heil Hitler. Eddie stared at the message. They believe it. They actually believe I'm still working for them. Tar Robertson stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. Good, now comes the hard part. What's that? Making them think you actually blew up the factory. The de Havilland factory in Hatfield was one of Britain's most important production facilities. It built mosquito bombers, fast twin-engine planes that caused havoc for the Germans. Von Groening wanted it destroyed, completely, but Eddie wasn't going to destroy it. Instead, MI5 came up with a plan. A brilliant, audacious plan. They would fake the explosion. How? Eddie asked when Tar Robertson explained it. Stage design, Tar Robertson said. We'll use explosives to blow up a small section of the factory that's already scheduled for demolition. Then we'll spread debris, add fake damage, take photographs. From the air, it'll look like a real sabotage attack. Eddie grinned. That's insane. That's espionage. The operation took place on January 30th, 1943. Eddie watched from a distance as controlled explosions ripped through an empty building on the factory grounds. Smoke billowed into the sky. Fire crews rushed in, pretending to fight the flames. Photographers captured everything. The destruction, the chaos, the damage. The next morning, British newspapers ran headlines. Sabotage at de Havilland factory. German agent suspected perfect. Eddie radioed Berlin. Mission complete. Factory heavily damaged. Returning to safe location. The Germans were ecstatic. Von Groening himself replied, Outstanding, Fritz. You are a hero of the Reich. Await extraction orders. Extraction. They wanted to bring him back to Germany. Eddie's heart sank. If I go back, they'll give me another mission. And another. I'll never escape. But Tar Robertson had a different idea. Let them extract you. Go back to Germany. Be the hero. Then when they give you another mission, come back to us again. Eddie stared at him. You want me to go back to Germany? Yes. And then return to England? Again? Yes, Eddie laughed. It was a bitter, disbelieving laugh. You're insane. No, Tar Robertson said. I'm practical. You're the only double agent the Germans completely trust. You've proven yourself to them. If you disappear now, they'll get suspicious. But if you go back, celebrate your success, and then volunteer for another mission, they'll never doubt you. Eddie thought about it. It was risky. Incredibly risky, but also thrilling. All right, he said. I'll do it. Tar Robertson smiled. I knew you would. They extracted Eddie through Portugal, a neutral country. A U-boat picked him up off the coast and took him back to occupied France. Von Groening was waiting at the dock. He pulled Eddie into a fierce hug. You did it, Chapman. You actually did it. Eddie forced a smile. I told you I would. They took him to Paris. A celebration. Champagne. Medals. Eddie was treated like a hero. Officers congratulated him. Women flirted with him. He played the part perfectly. But inside, he was calculating. How long can I keep this up? How many more missions before someone discovers the truth? 1 week later, they gave him his next assignment. There's an American air base in North Africa, Von Groening said. We need intelligence. Troop movements. Aircraft numbers. Can you get it? Eddie hesitated. North Africa. That's far. That's dangerous, but he nodded. Of course. They trained him for another month. New codes. New contacts. New cover story. And then in March 1943, they sent him to Lisbon to catch a flight to Casablanca. But Eddie never got on that flight. Instead, he walked into the British consulate in Lisbon and said 5 words. I'm Agent Zigzag. I'm back. The Germans waited for his report.
Days passed.
Then weeks. Then months. No word from Fritz. Von Groening grew worried. Something went wrong, he told his superiors. Chapman is compromised, but they didn't believe him. He's the best agent we have. He'll resurface. He never did. Eddie Chapman stayed in England. MI5 gave him a new identity, a new life. He even got paid. £5,000. More money than he'd ever had. But he wasn't finished, because in 1944 the Germans tried to contact him again. They sent a message through neutral channels. "Fritz, where are you?" Eddie grinned when Tar Robertson showed him the message. "Should I respond?" "Absolutely," Eddie sent back. "Alive, ready for new mission." The Germans were overjoyed. They gave him instructions. Report on D-Day preparations, location, timing, troops. Eddie did exactly that. He sent them detailed reports. All of it false. All of it designed to mislead German intelligence about where the Allies would land. The real invasion was planned for Normandy. Eddie told the Germans it would be Calais. They believed him. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces landed at Normandy. The Germans were caught completely off guard. Their defenses were in the wrong place. Thousands of troops were positioned at Calais, waiting for an invasion that never came. D-Day was a success, and Eddie Chapman played a part in it. After the war ended, Eddie returned to his old life. Sort of. He married, had a daughter, opened a health farm, tried to go straight, but he couldn't stay away from trouble. In the 1950s, he published a book about his wartime exploits. The British government tried to stop him. They threatened him with prosecution under the Official Secrets Act. Eddie didn't care. He published it anyway. The book became a bestseller, and for the first time, the world learned the truth about Agent Zigzag. The thief who became a spy, the spy who fooled both sides, the man who played the most dangerous game of World War II and walked away alive. Von Groening survived the war too. He was captured by the Allies and imprisoned. Years later, he was asked about Eddie Chapman. "Did you know he was a double agent?" a reporter asked. Von Groening smiled sadly. "I suspected, but I didn't want to believe it. Chapman was the best agent I ever trained. Even if he betrayed us, I couldn't help but admire him." Eddie heard about that interview years later. He laughed. Von Groening was a good man. In another life, we might have been friends, but this was war. And in war, there are no friends, only survivors. Eddie Chapman lived 2 lives after the war. One in public, one in shadow. The public Eddie was respectable, a businessman, a family man. He ran a health club in Hertfordshire. Customers came to lose weight, build muscle, recover from injuries. They had no idea the man who greeted them at the door had once parachuted into Nazi-occupied France, built bombs with German engineers, and lied to both Hitler and Churchill. But the shadow Eddie never disappeared. He couldn't help himself. Old habits die hard. In 1947, 2 years after the war ended, Eddie was arrested. Again, this time for smuggling. Gold bars hidden in false-bottomed suitcases. He'd gotten them from black market dealers in Belgium and tried to sell them in London. The police caught him. Of course they did. At the trial, Eddie's lawyer presented an unusual defense. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, "my client served his country during the war. He risked his life as a British agent. Surely that counts for something," the prosecutor laughed. "British agent? This man is a criminal. He's been convicted of theft, fraud, and now smuggling. What evidence is there that he ever worked for British intelligence?" The lawyer looked desperate. "I can provide testimony from MI5. Then do it." But MI5 refused. They wouldn't confirm or deny Eddie's wartime service. It was still classified, secret, dangerous. Eddie went to prison. Again, he served 18 months. When he was released, he was furious. "I saved their bloody lives during D-Day," he told his wife, Betty. "And this is how they repay me?" Betty didn't respond. She'd heard it all before. Eddie's stories, his complaints, his justifications. She loved him, but she also knew the truth. Eddie Chapman would never be satisfied with an ordinary life. He needed excitement, risk, danger. And if he couldn't find it legally, he'd find it somewhere else. In 1953, Eddie decided to write a book, not just any book, a tell-all memoir about his time as Agent Zigzag. Every detail, every mission, every lie he told, every person he fooled. His publisher was ecstatic. "This will be huge," the publisher said. "Nobody's ever written about double agents before. Not like this." But when the British government found out, they panicked. A letter arrived at Eddie's house. Official government stationery. MI5 letterhead. The message was short and clear. "Do not publish this book. You are bound by the Official Secrets Act. If you proceed, you will be prosecuted." Eddie read the letter and laughed. Prosecute me? For telling the truth? Betty was less amused. Eddie, don't be stupid. They can throw you in prison again. For longer this time. Let them try. Eddie published the book anyway. It was titled The Eddie Chapman Story, and it hit bookstores in 1954. The reaction was immediate. Newspapers ran headlines. Former spy breaks silence. MI5 furious. The government threatened legal action. But they never followed through. Why? Because prosecuting Eddie would mean confirming everything in the book. It would mean admitting that a convicted criminal had been one of Britain's most successful wartime agents. They couldn't allow that. So they did nothing. And Eddie's book became a bestseller. Journalists flocked to interview him. Is it all true? They asked. Did you really fool the Germans? Every word, Eddie said with a grin. And MI5? Did they really threaten you? Of course. They hate me now. But I don't care. I told the truth. That's what matters. But was it the truth? All of it? Years later, historians would discover that Eddie had embellished certain details, exaggerated his importance, made himself sound more heroic than he actually was. But the core of the story? That was real. Eddie Chapman had been Agent Zigzag. He had deceived the Germans. He had helped mislead them before D-Day. And for that, he deserved credit, even if the government refused to give it. In the 1960s, Eddie's life took another unexpected turn. A German journalist contacted him. His name was Dieter Kurtz, and he was writing a book about German intelligence during World War II. He'd found Eddie's name in declassified Abwehr files. I'd like to interview you, Dieter said over the phone. I want to know the truth. From your perspective, Eddie agreed. They met in a London cafe. Dieter brought files, photographs, documents. He spread them across the table. Look at this, Dieter said, pointing to a photograph. It showed a group of German officers standing outside a villa in France. Eddie recognized it immediately. The training camp in Nantes. And there, in the back row, was von Groening. Eddie stared at the photo. He hadn't thought about von Groening in years. Is he still alive? Eddie asked. Yes, he lives in Hamburg. Runs a small bookshop. Eddie felt a strange emotion. Not guilt, exactly, but something close. Does he know I was a double agent? Dieter nodded. He knows. He's known for years. What does he think about it? Dieter smiled sadly. He says you were the best student he ever had, even if you betrayed him. Eddie didn't know what to say. Dieter leaned forward. Would you like to meet him? I can arrange it. Eddie hesitated. Part of him wanted to. Part of him didn't. What would they say to each other? What could they say? No, Eddie said finally. Some things are better left in the past. Dieter nodded. He understood. They finished their coffee in silence. Then Dieter gathered his files and stood. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chapman. Your story is remarkable. Truly. Eddie watched him leave. Then he sat alone, staring at the photograph of von Groening. He knows. He's always known, and he doesn't hate me for it. That realization hit Eddie harder than he expected. Von Groening had been his teacher, his handler, maybe even his friend, in a strange, complicated way, and Eddie had betrayed him. But von Groening didn't hate him. He respected him. Eddie didn't know if that made it better or worse. In 1974, a film was made about Eddie's life. It was called Triple Cross, and it starred Christopher Plummer as Eddie Chapman. Eddie attended the premiere in London. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Eddie smiled and waved, playing the part of the celebrity spy. But inside, he felt strange. Watching his life on screen was surreal. The actor looked nothing like him. The script took liberties with the facts. Entire events were changed or fabricated. They made me look like James Bond, Eddie muttered to Betty as they left the theater. Betty laughed. You always wanted to be James Bond. Maybe, but I'm not. I was just a thief who got lucky. Lucky? Betty raised an eyebrow. Eddie, you survived 2 wars, tricked 2 governments, and lived to tell about it. That's not luck. That's skill, Eddie thought about that. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had been skilled, or maybe he'd just been reckless and lucky in equal measure. Either way, he was still alive. And that was more than most spies could say. In the 1980s, Eddie's health began to fail. Heart problems, lung problems. The years of smoking, drinking, and stress finally caught up with him. He spent more time at home. Less time chasing excitement. Betty took care of him, as she always had. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from Germany. Eddie opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a short note, handwritten in shaky script. Dear Eddie, I hope this letter finds you well. I am old now, sick, dying probably. But before I go, I wanted to tell you something. You were the best agent I ever trained. Not because you were loyal, not because you followed orders, but because you understood something most people don't. Survival is more important than ideology. I knew you were lying. From the beginning, I suspected. But I let you go anyway. Why? Because I admired you. You played the game better than anyone I've ever met. I don't hate you, Eddie. I never did. Live well. Die better. Von Gröning Eddie read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his desk drawer. He never responded. What could he say? But he kept the letter. And sometimes, late at night, he would take it out and read it again. I don't hate you, Eddie. I never did. Those words meant more to him than any medal, any award, any recognition from the British government. Because von Gröning understood. He understood what Eddie had done. And why, and he forgave him. Eddie Chapman died on December 11th, 1997. He was 83 years old. His funeral was small. Family, a few friends. No government officials. No MI5 representatives. No medals or honors. Just a simple service for a complicated man. Betty stood by his grave, tears streaming down her face. You were a bastard, she whispered. But you were my bastard. Eddie's daughter, Suzanne, put a hand on her mother's shoulder. Do you think he had any regrets? She asked. Betty thought about it. Then she shook her head. No, Eddie never regretted anything. That was his gift and his curse. They buried him in a quiet cemetery in Hertfordshire. No headstone mentioned his wartime service. No plaque honored Agent Zigzag. Just a simple inscription. Eddie Chapman, 1914-1997. He lived life on his own terms, and he did. Years later, historians would debate Eddie Chapman's legacy. Was he a hero? A villain? A patriot? A traitor? The truth is, he was all of those things, and none of them. He was a man who saw the world as a game. A dangerous, thrilling, deadly game. And he played it better than anyone. He fooled the Germans. He fooled the British. He fooled everyone, except himself. Eddie always knew exactly what he was, a survivor. Nothing more, nothing less. And in the end, isn't that the only thing that really matters? The war ended. Nations rose and fell. Empires crumbled. Ideologies changed. But Eddie Chapman survived. He outlived his enemies. He outlived his friends. He outlived the war itself. And when he died free, unbroken, unconquered. That's not a bad ending for a thief from Sunderland. In 2011, 14 years after Eddie's death, MI5 finally declassified his files. Thousands of pages, reports, radio transcripts, photographs, everything. Historians pored over the documents. And what they found confirmed what Eddie had always claimed. He was one of the most successful double agents in history. His false reports before D-Day had genuinely misled German intelligence. His fake sabotage of the de Havilland factory had boosted morale on both sides. His ability to maintain his cover under intense pressure was remarkable. One MI5 officer wrote in a memo, Chapman is uncontrollable, unpredictable, and utterly unreliable. But he is also brilliant. We will never have another agent like him. They were right. There would never be another Eddie Chapman. Another Agent Zigzag, because Eddie didn't follow the rules. He made his own, and somehow, against all odds, it worked. Today, Eddie Chapman's story is taught in intelligence training programs around the world, not as an example of what to do, but as an example of what's possible. Chapman broke every rule of espionage, instructors tell their students. He was reckless, arrogant, dishonest, and yet he succeeded. Why? Because he understood human psychology better than anyone. He knew how to manipulate trust, fear, and greed. Some students admire him. Others are horrified. But everyone remembers him. Because Eddie Chapman proved something important. You don't need to be loyal to be effective. You don't need to be honest to be useful. You just need to be smart. And lucky. And willing to risk everything. Eddie had all three, and that's why his story endures. Not because he was a hero, but because he was human, flawed, complicated, contradictory, just like the rest of us, but braver, bolder, more willing to take risks. Eddie Chapman didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for orders. He saw an opportunity, and he took it, and in doing so, he became a legend. Agent Zigzag, the man who fooled Hitler and Churchill, the thief who became a spy, the spy who became a hero, or maybe just a man who refused to die. Either way, his story is one worth remembering, because in the end, we all face the same choice Eddie faced. Do we play it safe? Or do we gamble everything for a chance at something greater? Eddie chose to gamble, and he won. Not because he was the best, but because he never stopped playing, even when the odds were against him, even when everyone told him to quit, even when death was won. Wrong move away, he kept playing. And that's why we remember him not as a saint, not as a villain, but as something far more interesting, a survivor.